The movie begins in a prison where we meet the main character, Arthur, also known as Joker. Arthur appears frail and weakened, having suffered from the lack of food and water. As the story unfolds, we discover why he's been imprisoned. Arthur had killed 5 people in public, which led to his arrest and punishment. However, it wasn't just the act but the manner of his crimes that gained him notoriety. At the time of the killings, Arthur had assumed the Joker persona, complete with distinctive makeup and attire, which made him so infamous that a TV movie was even made about him. This TV film gained a significant following, and many viewers became fans of Arthur's Joker persona. To these fans, Joker Arthur was seen as a hero rather than a criminal. They believed he did society a favor by eliminating those 5 individuals who were perceived as bad people. These people had harassed Arthur, ridiculing and pushing him to the edge, until he finally snapped and took action. However, not everyone saw Arthur in the same light. Many viewed him as a dangerous criminal who had taken lives, and he was punished accordingly. Arthur has been in prison for quite a while now, and it seems uncertain how many more years he'll spend behind bars, as his case hasn't even been heard in court yet. Poor Arthur, already burdened by the treatment he received on the outside, is now facing torment from prison guards who mock him further. One day, Arthur's lawyer calls him for a meeting. On the way there, Arthur catches sight of a girl named Lee, who locks eyes with him and, with a smirk, gestures at him as if holding a shotgun. Arthur is captivated by her confident gaze, but before he can interact further, the police pull him away to continue his journey. When he finally meets his lawyer, he learns that although his lawyer is handling his case, he's also using Arthur's fame for personal gain. Arthur's story has spread far and wide, and his notoriety has made him a subject of great public interest. His lawyer, capitalizing on this, has brought reporters along to interview him, hoping the publicity will work in his favor. The lawyer instructs Arthur to answer the reporters' questions and share his story, drawing them even deeper into the Joker's world. Arthur reluctantly heads to the interview room as instructed by his lawyer. Despite his distaste for reporters, he knows he has to comply if he ever hopes to get out of prison. During the interview, he faces questions that dredge up painful memories, stirring anger within him. Although he responds, his answers are laced with frustration, as the questions force him to relive his darkest moments. Yet he remains truthful, sensing that cooperating might improve his chances of release. The real purpose of these interviews, however, is more than just gathering his side of the story. They are a daily psychological assessment. Authorities want to determine whether Arthur's mental state has improved, as many believe he's unhinged, a mad joker who committed murder in a fit of insanity. These interviews are just a means of gauging his mental stability. After the interview, a police officer escorts Arthur back to the prison's music room, a place where inmates can play instruments. To Arthur's surprise, Lee, the girl he had seen earlier, is there as well. They meet for the first time, and both feel an instant connection, thrilled to finally speak to each other. Arthur asks Lee why she's here, and she reveals her story. In a fit of rage, she had set fire to the building where she lived with her mother, tragically causing her mother's death in the blaze. This act had landed her in prison, facing consequences she could hardly escape. Hearing her story, Arthur bursts out laughing. It's a reflex, part of his unusual nature. Then, Lee turns the question on him, asking why he's in prison. Arthur grins and says, "You don't know? I'm here because I killed 5 people." He's so infamous that he assumes everyone, even within the prison walls, knows his story. As time passes, Arthur and Lee grow closer, meeting frequently and becoming fast friends. One day, Lee boldly suggests they escape together. Arthur, however, shakes his head and replies, "No, I can't do that." For now, he feels trapped, bound by both his crimes and his sense of fate. Arthur, wary of the guards and consequences, tells Lee, "They'll shoot me if I try to escape." Lee, however, has already developed feelings for him and longs to break free and spend her life with him. When Arthur turns down her escape plan, she feels hurt but doesn't show it right away. Later, as they sit together in the prison theater, Lee, still upset, channels her frustration by secretly setting fire to the back of the theater. As smoke fills the hall, people rush out in panic, leaving only Arthur and Lee behind. Instead of fleeing, they stay, watching the flames and realizing they share a deep connection. In that moment, their feelings become undeniable. Arthur, too, has fallen for Lee. The two finally express their love for each other before eventually running to the exit. But before they can fully escape, officers appear, dragging them back to their cells. Rather than being upset, Arthur and Lee start laughing, embracing the chaos and finding joy in each other's defiance. Arthur's laughter grows louder, echoing through the hall with an eerie, almost unhinged delight. Back in his cell, Arthur receives a surprise visit from Lee, who sneaks in with the help of a guard. Together, they spend another year in prison, sharing stolen moments whenever they can. One day, Lee says, "I want to see you as the Joker," and smuggles in makeup. She carefully applies it, recreating Arthur's Joker persona, complete with hauntingly bright colors. Arthur finds a thrill in seeing himself this way again, feeling a sense of freedom within the confines of his cell. The next day, Arthur's lawyer returns with a renowned reporter to conduct yet another interview. This time, they want to probe his mental state further. Arthur dreads talking about his past, knowing it stirs up painful memories, but the reporter presses on, asking invasive questions about his family and his troubled life. When the reporter brings up his mother, whom he had also killed, Arthur's demeanor shifts. The memories overwhelm him, filling him with rage. His calm exterior cracks, and he lashes out at the reporter, no longer able to suppress his emotions. In a surprising turn, however, Arthur's sentence comes to an end, and he's finally released. Free at last, Arthur steps into the world with a new sense of purpose and his Joker identity firmly intact. Arthur walks out of the jail, the weight of the world still pressing on his shoulders. As he steps into the light of the outside world, he catches a glimpse of his interview on the TV, further fueling his notoriety. This moment marks a turning point, as Arthur is now about to face a court trial. On his way to court, he is greeted by a crowd of loyal fans who had gathered in the streets to show their support. These people, who had admired him for his bold actions, cheered for his release, believing that Arthur was a symbol of justice for the oppressed. They felt that the people he had killed were deserving of their fate, and that Arthur, in his twisted way, had acted in defense of himself and those like him. Among the crowd, Arthur sees Lee, and their eyes meet. Both of them share a smile, knowing that, despite everything, they still have each other. The atmosphere is filled with anticipation as Arthur is escorted into the courtroom, where the hearing begins. The prosecution lawyer stands up first, condemning Arthur's actions. He argues that Arthur, in his madness, had killed 5 people in cold blood on a public train, a heinous crime that should not be overlooked. In contrast, Arthur's lawyer rises to speak in his defense. She portrays Arthur as a man who had been abandoned by society, living a life of isolation and poverty. She argues that Arthur is not a malicious killer, but a broken soul who, in his fragile mental state, had no choice but to defend himself from the people who had tormented him. His mind is like that of a child, she explains. He did what he thought was right, what he believed was self-defense. But the prosecutor isn't swayed. He insists that no matter the circumstances, Arthur took lives and must face the consequences of his actions. He is a murderer, he declares, and murderers do not deserve to walk free. The judge, after hearing both arguments, decides to extend the date of the trial, indicating that more deliberation is needed. After the session, Arthur's lawyer speaks privately with the judge, urging him to see things from Arthur's perspective and to ensure he doesn't lose his case. The judge warns her that, at this rate, Arthur will be convicted and punished, and she must take a different approach if she wants to secure his freedom. Later, when Arthur is returned to his cell, his lawyer visits him again. She asks about Lee, curious about the woman who had appeared in his life. Arthur, smiling softly, replies, "She's a very good girl. I love her." In that moment, despite the looming uncertainty of his fate, Arthur feels a fleeting sense of happiness, an escape from his world of chaos and pain. Arthur, still holding on to his trust in Lee, listens as his lawyer delivers some startling news. She tells him that Lee has been deceiving him all along. "Do you really know her?" the lawyer asks, pushing Arthur to question everything. She reveals that Lee's parents are not dead, as she had claimed. In fact, her father is a doctor, and both of her parents are alive. To make matters worse, Arthur learns that Lee was never punished and had deliberately paid to be disguised as a prisoner, all just to get close to him. One day, when Lee visits Arthur in jail, he confronts her about the lies. Lee doesn't deny it. She admits, "Yes, you're right. My mom and dad are alive. I lied to you, and I kept this secret. I deliberately paid to be a prisoner so I could meet you. But I never meant to hurt you." Her voice softens as she explains, "I just wanted to be with you. I've seen your TV film over 20 times, and I fell in love with you. No matter what happens, I'm going to get you out of here. We'll be free, and we'll be together." Arthur, still reeling from the truth, can't help but feel a surge of affection for her. He agrees, smiling for the first time in a long while. "Okay," he says, finally feeling that there might be a way out of his pain, a way to live a life of freedom and love with Lee. The trial continues, and today, Arthur's neighbor steps up to testify on his behalf. She recounts her memories of Arthur's troubled past, describing how she frequently saw him and his mother together. On one occasion, she witnessed Arthur violently attacking his mother, which deeply terrified her. Fearing for her own child, she moved to another city. But when she heard Arthur was in jail, she felt guilty and returned to testify for him. "He was always misunderstood," she says, her voice shaking. "He never wanted to hurt anyone." She goes on to explain how, during that attack, she realized that the person who harmed his mother wasn't truly Arthur, it was the Joker. "Arthur isn't the one who committed those murders," she claims. "The Joker inside him did it. He was pushed too far, and that's who took control." Arthur listens to the testimony, and something inside him stirs. For the first time in what feels like forever, he feels a glimmer of courage. The truth, no matter how twisted, sets him free in some strange way. He realizes that the Joker is not just a mask, but a part of him, an entity that emerged when society pushed him to his breaking point. Arthur is no longer just a man. He is both Arthur and the Joker. And with this realization, the madness consumes him, filling him with an untamed courage that only a man like the Joker could have. Arthur, with a sudden surge of defiance, stands up in the courtroom, his voice filled with anger and resolve. "I will fight my own case," he declares, silencing the room. "I don't need a lawyer." With those words, he dismisses his lawyer and strides away, leaving everyone stunned. Lee, standing outside, watches this bold move with pride. She feels a surge of hope, knowing that the Joker is finally taking control. She believes this is the right decision, that Arthur has become the Joker fully, and only the Joker can fight for his freedom. The day of the final court hearing arrives. Arthur, now fully embracing his Joker identity, walks into the courtroom, dressed in his iconic clothes and makeup. He is no longer just Arthur. He is the Joker, ready to face his fate. His fans wait outside, eager to hear the outcome, while Lee watches from the crowd, knowing that whatever happens, Arthur's transformation is complete. As the hearing begins, a familiar face steps forward, a co-worker of Arthur's, someone who had worked with him for years and knew him well. The co-worker recounts the time when Arthur and he boarded the train together, the moment when the Joker's transformation took place. "I saw everything," he says. "When Arthur was killing those people, it wasn't Arthur anymore. It was the Joker inside him." Arthur, now fully in his Joker persona, rises to his feet, his eyes burning with rage. "Tell me," he demands, his voice dripping with madness. "Who did you see when I was killing them?" The co-worker, visibly shaken, answers in a trembling voice, "I saw the Joker. It was the Joker who killed them." This testimony sends Arthur into a frenzy. He lashes out, his voice growing louder with each word. You see how they work. They don't need witnesses. They don't need evidence. If they want someone, guilty or not, they'll grab them, lock them up, and throw away the key." His words are a bitter truth, a condemnation of the system that has trapped him. The courtroom falls silent, the air thick with tension, as Arthur's fury takes over. He is no longer just a man standing trial. He is the Joker, and he will fight for his freedom, no matter the cost. Arthur, filled with frustration and bitterness, turns his accusations toward the police. If only the police had arrived on time that day, they would have seen who the real culprit was, he rages. "I wouldn't have lost everything." His words echo through the courtroom as he continues to blame the system for his downfall. He's finally had enough, and after his outburst, he declares that today's testimony is enough, demanding that the case be over. The judge, however, extends the date once again, leaving Arthur in a state of turmoil. When Arthur returns to the prison, the consequences of his words hit him hard. The police, furious at his public condemnation, decide to teach him a lesson. They drag him through a brutal punishment, beating him mercilessly to show their anger. After the savage beating, they throw him back into his cell, leaving him battered and broken. 2 days later, the court hearing begins again. This time, Lee, dressed as the Joker, arrives with high hopes. She believes this is the day Arthur will be defeated, that the Joker's reign will end. But the man who enters the courtroom is not the fierce, rebellious Joker she expected. Arthur, now visibly broken, wears a face of resignation. The Joker's fire has dimmed, and he agrees to take responsibility for his actions. "I have done wrong," he says, his voice quiet but filled with regret. "I am ashamed. I confess." This confession enrages the prosecutor, Rico. Unable to tolerate Arthur's acceptance of guilt, she storms out of the courtroom in disgust, unwilling to witness the Joker's defeat. But the case has already been sealed. Arthur's confession has ended it. As the verdict is delivered, Arthur sheds his Joker persona and returns to his true self. Yet, something inside him snaps. He starts laughing uncontrollably, an eerie and wild laugh that seems to come from deep within. The doctor, who had opposed him all along, stands enraged. He tries to stop Arthur's laughter by force, but it's no use. Arthur's laughter only grows louder, drowning out the chaos around him. And then, in a moment of complete madness, an explosion rips through the courtroom, the shockwave of Arthur's laughter causing destruction. The walls crumble, and several people lie dead or injured in the rubble. Amid the devastation, Arthur stands at the center of it all, his laugh echoing through the wreckage. As he steps out of the destroyed courtroom, he sees a familiar sight. One of his fans, dressed as the Joker, recognizes him through the chaos. The fan, seeing Arthur for who he truly is, acknowledges him with a nod, and Arthur, in his twisted way,